This is the Razer Viper Mini, a wired mouse released 5 years ago with average specs, mediocre clicks, and the worst software ever made. And yet, this mouse is legendary and adored to this day for 2 reasons: the shape and the price. Mainly the shape though. It's so good that when it was released it set the standard for what a smaller mouse should look like and shifted the landscape away from egg shapes like the G203 and towards where the market stands today. At the time, I chose to main it over way more premium options because of just how comfortable it was to hold and how well I played with it. But despite that influence and popularity, Razer never made a true Viper Mini wireless. Well, we did get this, but the whole appeal of the Viper Mini was that it was good and affordable. This was not the latter. So, because we never got an updated version, even 5 years later, a mouse that so much as shares resemblance to the Viper Mini in terms of its shape will be hyped as an exciting option for people looking for that elusive Viper Mini wireless. So, understandably, there's been a bit of buzz surrounding the Pwnage Trinity CF. When first picking it up, my impression was that this felt familiar, and yeah, this is it. This is the Viper Mini wireless we never got. The shape is almost the one-to-one copy, and it has the modern specs you'd expect from a mouse released in 2025. The weight is very impressive too. At 40 grams, it's actually even lighter than not only the wired Viper Mini, but Razer's wireless version too, and it does all that at less than half the price of the Signature Edition. And I hate it. This is the least impressed I've been with a mouse in a long time, and the worst part of it is just how long it took for me to figure out exactly why. Because like I said, it should be good, it should be fantastic, but I just hated playing with it. I tried it in Battlefield and Call of Duty first. These games require very fast flicks, which is where I usually like a lighter mouse, but it just didn't work. I was so shaky at the end of my flicks, and there was this delay after every movement that I just couldn't get rid of. What about other games then? I tried Counter-Strike and it went a bit better, but this mouse just feels so off. Any large movement still had that shakiness to it, and it just felt so slow. I thought that maybe I just had to put more force into those movements because of DPI deviation, that shakiness caused by that extra inertia of a slower sensitivity. So I checked, and it was a lot slower. My OP1 measured at 1640 DPI, while this measured at 1450. But even after accounting for it with the in-game sensitivity, movements still felt more sluggish than they did on my OP1. I also thought maybe it could be latency. When playing Kovacs, I noticed my movements did feel a bit delayed, and when testing it against my OP1, it had 5 milliseconds more motion latency. But then I restarted the mouse and it went back down to its usual +2. It'll occasionally jump back up 5 extra milliseconds after being woken up from sleep mode, but the issues I'm feeling are consistent. This isn't. Am I just not good enough to use a mouse this light? My main is the OP1 and it is 50 grams. Maybe I don't have the mouse control to use something that weighs a little bit less. So, I tried using the HTS Ultra, a mouse even lighter than the Trinity. Okay, so that's not the problem. If anything, I actually really liked the lighter weight. Even though the Trinity was already 40 grams, the HTS was noticeably easier to move around. Which gave me an idea. What if I took out the battery? I don't mind using wired mice anyways, and the extra weight reduction might help make it feel a bit less dense. So I took the mouse apart, but when going to remove the battery, I noticed something. It was placed right at the very back of the mouse. This is a bit strange, not unheard of, but generally mice have their batteries at least up a bit. This one was basically touching the back wall. I didn't think much of it though, took it out and tried playing with it wired, and sure enough, it did feel better. A lot better. That shakiness at the end of my flicks was entirely gone, the delay between movements minimized too. It was so drastic that there was no chance that this was entirely and exclusively caused by the 5 gram weight reduction of removing the battery. I went from hating my time using this mouse to actually not minding it. Something else had to be contributing here. I haven't really put a lot of thought into how the weight of a mouse is positioned before. The numerical weight itself, yes, and I have been swapping to lighter and lighter mice over time, but that trend stopped at the OP18K for me. I went to it from the far lighter G-Wolves HTX, but despite it being heavier, it really didn't feel like it. At the time, I put my preference down to the various other ways the OP1 is better, but what if the reason I didn't mind the weight increase was how that weight was balanced? The OP1 is wired, it doesn't have a battery. So when I went to make a movement, the majority of the weight I had to counteract to stop the mouse is up here, right around where my fingers naturally sit when holding it. On the Trinity though, both the incredibly low battery position and adjustable sensor railing, I'll get to that in a bit, don't worry, create all this momentum from the very base of the mouse which I can't apply pressure to. This is where that shakiness was coming from. I couldn't counteract the momentum generated from wider flicks. Removing the battery shifted the center of mass further upwards, closer to my contact points, and honestly, fixed the mouse for me. When I said I hated my time using it before, that wasn't an exaggeration. It was a struggle to get myself to even get background footage for this video because it just felt so unwieldy. Not to mention how bad I played with it stock, but that's a different story. I'm not sure if this will be felt to that extent by everyone though. People hold their mice differently, and I do place my fingers unusually high up, especially on the right side, which is probably why I favour forward weight balancing more than most seem to. Maybe someone who grips like this will love this type of weight balance. Plus, I know I am a little bit over-analytical with my own mechanics, and the issues I was noticing with my aim probably weren't actually as bad as they felt to me. And I actually do appreciate this mouse a little more now for making me aware of just how important good weight balancing is. It's given me a much better understanding of the topic, as well as making me think about why I do or don't like certain other mice in my collection. Maybe this is why I like the OP1 so much after all, not the build quality or shape. I will say though, this is a very extreme example. For most mice, weight balancing hasn't been something I considered because it never stuck out to me this much, even if other mice also had batteries positioned in the very far back. But it has made me wonder, how precise do we need to get with weight balance? Do tiny shifts in the position of the center of mass impact how a mouse feels to use in any noticeable way? Or is it only something that matters when it's not done well or is not compatible with your grip style? I'd love to experiment with this a bit more in the future, maybe hollow out a mouse and place weights inside at different points to see how much each one impacts how it feels to use, but that's a project for another time. So after all this, is the Trinity good now? Not really. Even considering the effort I had to go to make the mouse feel as okay as it does, it still just feels okay. But before I talk about what else this mouse gets wrong, I do want to talk about the two things it does do really well. The first of which being that the sensor can move. This is such a seemingly minor thing that I think its impact will get overlooked, especially since most people don't understand what sensor position does, but make no mistake, this is the mouse's standout feature. So why does a moving sensor matter? The core of it is that by shifting the sensor physically upwards, the same physical angle change will translate into a larger angle change on screen, but that increase is much more noticeable when moving the mouse with your wrist. So it is different from having a higher sensitivity or DPI, which would increase the speed of wrist and arm movements equally, and since this isn't something that can be changed by software, for most mice, their sensor position is something you're stuck with. Personally, I hate how low sensors feel. They create horrible disconnects between movements with my wrist and with my arm, and there are some mice I just can't use because of it. And I think for people who grip a bit further back, some of the mice I really enjoy for their more forward sensor position could feel awful for them. So having the option to change it, either because you know what sensor position is optimal for you, or to experiment and see how different ones impact your aim, is just amazing, and this review wouldn't be complete without giving credit where credit is due. And now I get to take that credit away. For anyone who hasn't seen, Pwnage put out this tweet a couple of days ago threatening to pursue appropriate measures to protect our intellectual property against G-Wolves, who were also tweeting about implementing adjustable sensor position on their mice. And honestly, I don't really care if they're legally in the right or not. The only reason people talk about Pwnage's mice are because of the shapes they straight up copy from other companies. Those companies put in the time, effort and money into research and development to make a fantastic shape, which I'll be talking about a lot more after this, not Pwnage. Pwnage didn't do any of that. And shape is the most important part of a mouse. The adjustable sensor position is impactful and a bigger deal than I think most people realize, but it can't hold a candle to getting the shape right. It just comes off as incredibly hypocritical to be trying to defend their patented adjustable sensor position while also being known as a company for taking popular shapes. And frankly, it'd be disappointing if the only company you could get a mouse with an adjustable sensor position from was a company with as bad of a quality control track record as Pwnage has. More on that later, back to the video. The next noteworthy element of this mouse is its shape. Like I said before, it's basically one-to-one with the Viper Mini, a legendary design which has stood the test of time so well for, in my opinion, one key reason: its malleability. This is a strength it shares with the most popular gaming mouse around, the G Pro Superlight. The GPX fits anyone, and the Viper Mini tries to do something similar but for smaller hands. I think the Viper has a smarter approach to this idea though. It maintains some of the features seen on mice that try to specialize a little more, but in very carefully considered amounts. I think the best way to get this idea across is to look at the opposite, the XM2. There is a very clear, proper way to hold this mouse, and it feels great if you can hold it that way. If you can't though, it doesn't really work. There's no room for flexibility with finger placement due to the side curvature, and you'll find yourself almost getting pushed back to that proper position. The GPX sits at the polar opposite end of that spectrum, where it's so neutral that no grip feels intended. And this is fine, but it's just fine. While it works and feels comfortable for a lot of people, there's a decent chance that a mouse that specializes a little bit more would work even better. The Viper Mini, on the other hand, tries to strike that balance, where there are features to make certain grip styles feel more comfortable, but it doesn't place too much emphasis on any of them. Take a look at that intended grip for the XM2 again, for example. Trying it on the Superlight, my fingers just kind of rest against its fairly uniform sides, but the Viper Mini offers just a bit more flair that give my pinky and ring more defined points to sit against and push off of in the same way the XM2 does. At the same time though, this isn't done to the extent that it would come at the expense of other grip styles. My relaxed claw still feels stable here, whereas on the XM2, that same ridge forces my fingers to uncomfortably curl around it. The back hump also offers some stability for claw, not as much as something like the XM2, but it still lets you pull the mouse into your palm for extra support when flicking while not being intrusive to the point where you can't move the mouse around with your fingertips. Which is also the reason I think it's fairly popular for fingertip grip. Being thinner around the center gives people who like that grip style a more precise feeling experience than a wider mouse does if they choose to hold it there, but again, it's a choice and comes back around to malleability. This shape is just so flexible and well suited to a variety of styles that it's no wonder it has as many fans as it does. And it's no wonder Pwnage chose to copy it for this mouse. Just as a reminder, this isn't Pwnage's creation. And while this is common practice in the mouse market, I think it's important to keep in mind because the shape is one of only two things this mouse does well. This is where my praise ends. Believe it or not, removing the battery wasn't the only mod I had to do to get this mouse into an acceptable state. There were two other stock features that basically had to be addressed before this mouse felt comfortable to use, and they were the skates and the coating. The stock skates were some of the worst I've tried, honestly. It's not uncommon for me to swap to aftermarkets and stock is really good, but it's not often that a skate feels this bad. It was a lot slower than good skates overall, but more specifically made starting movements harder relative to continuing them. So micro adjustments felt really muddy and it didn't provide the equivalent benefits to stopping power that you'd expect from a slower skate. And all of that was compounded by how scratchy they felt on more textured pads. It was so bad that I swapped them out after 20 minutes or so. The second big issue was the coating. I mentioned before how the shape is only a little larger than the Viper Minis, and that is okay. It's borderline too big though, and that line gets pushed when using grip tape, which is basically mandatory here, at least for me, since the coating on this mouse is not good at all. I never have issues with coating. I have very dry hands, so while I do choose grip tape if I can, it's very rare for a lack of grip to be an active issue, more just something to be potentially improved upon. But here, I felt like the mouse was trying to escape from my hands, especially on the buttons. My fingers just slide right across it in a way that doesn't happen on other mice, and it led to my grip feeling incredibly unstable. To add a small caveat to this, apparently the other colorways have better coating than the full black version, which is the one I have, so this criticism might not apply on those versions. I don't know, I haven't tried them. The final issue I want to talk about is the build quality. And to be honest, if I hadn't had this happen with another mouse before, the build quality here could have given me my second big revelation about how important each aspect of a mouse is. Structural stability is one of the last things I'd list in terms of importance. Obviously the mouse can't snap in your hands, but other than that, why does it matter? Because a premium mouse should feel appropriately premium, and this feels like a toy. If you've watched other videos about this mouse, you've seen this flexing on the bottom of it, and that's here on my unit too, but the sides on mine aren't stable either. They creak with the slightest pressure, and it's not hard to actually force them inwards with a bit more. This genuinely mattered in gameplay for me too. Compared to the OP1, I didn't feel as confident moving this mouse around, especially when I'd hear it creak while playing. The clicks not only move vertically when pressing them, but the amount of force needed to activate them varied as well. Lower on the buttons, they felt light and snappy, but higher up that force easily doubles, so that full fingertip grip I mentioned earlier wouldn't work after all. I know some people have said that these kind of build quality issues are pretty standard for carbon fiber releases, but if this is a given from using the material, then I don't know if it's worth using until it can be done right. Also, I've tried the WL Mouse Ying since I wrote the script. It's completely fine. I don't know what happened here. Either way though, I hope the overall build quality is going to, or maybe it already has, improved for future batches of this mouse. With my reviews, I like to try and strike a balance between positives and negatives. Even for a pad like the Heian, which I don't like at all, I try to understand why someone else would. But I think for this mouse, I've kind of already talked about why people might like it because there's only two reasons: the shape and the sensor position. Those are the only two reasons why you would pick this mouse over its competitors. I'm not saying that every other aspect of this mouse is terrible, but none of them are up to the standards we should hold mice at this price point too. The Pwnage Trinity costs $140 USD, and it just does not compete with other mice in that price range. I know that compared to the Viper Mini Signature Edition, $140 isn't terrible, but I don't want to give this mouse a pass on the value front just because that one is even worse. Especially when there are mice offering so much better value for money, including the original $30 Viper Mini Wired. Hi, one more thing. I just want to say that I know this review won't make me many friends in this community, but I don't hate Pwnage or dislike people who like this mouse. I know that people enjoy things for different reasons, and most people aren't looking for min-max aiming performance and just want to see a shape they like with modern specs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But my focus with my reviews will always be on how peripherals impact performance and what performance we can get for certain price points, so that's what I focused on here. If you do want to hear opinions about other aspects of this mouse, like side buttons, scroll wheel, that kind of thing, I'd recommend checking out some other reviews. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope Pwnage can improve for their future releases. There is potential here. All the components needed for a good mouse are present. It's just a lot less than the sum of its parts right now.